I'm feeling really pressured here. I lost my arm almost 40 years ago, and I've been studying this, I've been living it. I went back to work in construction and as a self-employed owner-operator for 10 years. I went to work in rehab for another 6 years. I served on the board of directors of the WCB, where we were lobbying for better services and saw that it wasn't anything like the money I got in my pocket. We count it in millions and hundreds of millions of dollars, where talking about injured workers at the top doesn't fly. We have to talk about money. That's what we have to talk about. And then I got involved with researchers for the last 20 years, trying to bring the lived experience of injured workers into the research world. Not the last, but one of the sessions I was at last month, a good researcher said, "Steve, you're actual real researcher now." I went, "Oh, okay." In my spare time, I'm a TV producer. I got a little TV show in Thunder Bay. But I'm kind of going, I've learned a lot of stuff, but what's really important? I mean, in 15 minutes or 13 minutes, what's key? And just before I came up, after I did all my notes, I thought, one of the keys for me is where I came from before I lost my arm. And that was as one of those hippies in the 60s who said, what's important in life? And what we said was community. Our friends and family, the people around us is what's important. And that has been the foundation of really everything that I've done and successes I've done and been part of. None of which are due to me, they're due to the community I'm part of. The people who are there with me, who share, who help me along the way, not because I'm paying them, not because I'm entitled to anything, it's because we think we're there to help each other. So a little bit about the organization I'm part of, the Ontario Network of Injured Workers Groups. We're made up of small self-help support groups all across Ontario. We came together in 1991 to form an organization that could work on our behalf to try to make changes in the political level with the bureaucracy. It's volunteer driven. We have no funding. $4,000 to $12,000 a year, our annual budget. Like, okay. We've done incredible amounts as volunteers working with partners. Here's one of our big successes. We've taken a number of cases to the Supreme Court of Canada or as interveners. This is one in 2003 where the Nova Scotia government said, if you've got chronic pain, tough love's the way to go. We're going to give you 4 weeks of benefits, a little bit of therapy, and then you're out the door, because that's what's going to work. Well, we challenged it in the Supreme Court, and we packed the court. Some of the people that are in the room are on that picture. And we had those Supreme Court justices all kind of looking at us as people with disabilities, and that was part of our process, that we want to bring our real lives into policy. We formed a Community University Research Alliance in 2004, and working together with advocates like Legal Beagles, researchers, and injured workers, we were able to both document what really happens to us, get folks who really didn't know about us so much on our side. It's so funny, I was just talking to one of my friends who's a union rep here and said, hanging out with a person with real mobility challenges for the last 2 days has really informed me in terms of my own work. And that is a key piece, to spend time together, to really get to know each other, to develop trust, and see what our lives are like. It's a key component to understanding the issues. We right away went to work with the WSIB and said, we're going to be bringing new knowledge. Can we actually use this to make change? And one of the things we did is we developed these blue sky discussions on stigma, return to work, and tracking outcomes. Some worked better than others. The one was, and we heard about this yesterday a number of times, about the stigma that people with disabilities face. We were able, it's like magic. I don't know how it happened. Well, I do know how it happened, but it was magic where the top management at the WSIB went, oh my God, we cause stigma in the people that we're supposed to help, that we're trying to help. And they were empowered by their CEO at the time to actually understand that and to identify it within their organization and develop action plans to combat that stigma. Like once they got it, us as injured workers just kind of sat back and watched it unfold. And it was a magical experience. And then they went around and bragged to all the other compensation boards about what they did. Incredible. The power of working together is so important. And I think that's how we're going to solve these challenges we've got. A little bit about workers' compensation. It's our first social program. Started 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago. And I took history in university, and I love history. So understanding our history helps us a little bit identify where our opportunities are going forward. The Meredith principles, we heard a little bit about Meredith yesterday. He was a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Ontario, the leader of the Progressive Conservative Party, a real radical. No laugh? So he said the normal program of having to sue your employer really doesn't work. Doesn't really work for anybody. So how can we develop public policy that provides stability and security for employers so that they're not dealing with unintended or unexpected consequences down the road, but also be fair to the workers? So he said, okay, let's take it out of the courts and let's put in place a number of key principles. Compensation as long as the disability lasts. That collective liability, meaning the liability for an individual employer is spread across all employers. We have an integrated economy. We're all kind of connected. And that the employer pays. We don't have to prove fault, that it's administered by an independent agency, and that it's non-adversarial. So that we're really focusing on helping the person move forward. There's Sir William, that flaming radical. Our present situation in Ontario. We have between 14 and 21,000 workers injured every year or subject to a disease who end up with a permanent impairment. So we're just adding to the list of people with disabilities at an incredible rate every year. The long-term outcomes, this is part of our RACWI research project, 45% end up chronically unemployed, 3 to 5 years post-injury. 20% are below the poverty line, another 25% are just hovering around the poverty line. Only about 20% of those people get long-term benefits from WSIB, and only about, well, let me see, the last numbers I saw, I think it was about 3% actually get their full loss of earnings benefits. So when you get it, it's the richest system in Canada around disability, but hardly anyone gets those numbers. And 45% are facing depression and mental challenges. This is really the biggest issue that we face. Because you start here as a worker, and the system, you just go down, 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 and you lose your power, and you lose your ability to face the challenges coming up ahead. And in a way, it's motivated so much by how we think about our systems. The austerity agenda, the neoliberal agenda, says everybody can work. And if you don't have a job, it's your fault. But we've got 50% unemployment for people with disabilities. So I guess it's all your faults. It's fair, eh? The profits really for corporations trump the disabled workers. It's funny, the system says you have to have an incentive to go back to work. We've got to force you to go back to work. It's interesting, on the news today, the Royal Bank made $11 billion profit. Now, I don't see any incentive to give back there. Like there's no incentive to say you make that much. You have to then share it with your workers, your customers, or anyone. We've seen, because of this agenda, a 30% reduction in benefits and really a 30% reduction in people who get benefits. And the focus really is on long-term. And what we're doing is we're forcing people onto the social assistance system. In Ontario, we have like 490,000 people receiving disability benefits through our welfare system. And that number has climbed, almost doubled in 10 years. And we're also moving more and more into precarious employment. And what we know is if you have a union and you got a strong contract relationship, your chances of maintaining your employment go up exponentially. In terms of our suggestions for moving forward, they're like injured workers. When we do our surveys with injured workers, they say, I want to go back to work. Like 90% say that's the number one thing I want to do. But we end up, so many of us, unemployed. Partially because of how the policies and these levers are. These ideas that you don't really want to go back to work, you need to be forced. You need to have economic incentive. So one of those is this experience rating, and we heard from Catherine Lapel yesterday about that. It has created amazing adversarial relationships. You go back to the principles of how this was started, they're almost all gone. Collective liability is almost gone. We're moving to experience rating throughout the whole system. And so employers are now kind of going, are you going to be a liability, either as your own worker who's injured or a new worker with a disability coming in? So it creates a challenge because of how the policy is structured at the workers' compensation. We say, let's go collective liability, a flat rate, just like our public health care. Everybody pays the same. No one appeals if you're going to actually go for surgery. That how you get your benefits. We used to have a pension system, which is the one I'm under. My pension is for life. It's based on my level of disability. I'll never be rich, but I'll never fall into poverty. Now we have a system that's a future economic loss where we have to determine how much are you going to make next year? And we're going to then use that to determine what your future benefits are. How do we know? Well, the best guesses oftentimes aren't very accurate. We're also saying that we should separate supports for employment from your income support. That's how it is in my case. I get my pension regardless of what happens in terms of employment. I can take risks. I can be a self-employed person and not worry about, even as we heard yesterday on the panel, Lisa had to go, what's going to happen if I'm not successful? Where are my benefits going to be? I didn't have to worry about that. And health care benefits as well need to be separated from those entitlements. In terms of the system-wide proposals, I mean, we focus so much on workers' comp, but so many of us are off of comp and end up on the bigger issues. The same principles we're suggesting apply. That the income security be separated from the employment supports and separated from the health and the quality of life supports. And that what we're seeing in Ontario now is some real interesting work going on. We've got the Basic Income Project that's setting the level for workers with disabilities, with anyone with a disability, right up around $1,800 a month. That's bringing you just right up to the poverty line. How you then integrate earnings is the other part. And we just have a report in Ontario released 2 weeks ago, the Roadmap for Change, looking at reworking the social assistance system in Ontario. And it's really useful to go look at that report, even if it's just the executive summary, which is only 20 pages. The report's 200. But it talks about the principles of how to really encourage folks to move into employment. I know my focus has really been in kind of the system issues. There's all kinds of other things we need to do to move into employment, and there's different sectors that you're going to hear more suggestions coming up. Here are some resources you can look at further. And I really encourage you all this afternoon to think more about this and how can we be successful in all these different realms to move into secure employment and productive lives for people with disabilities. Thank you so much.